Present.
Vice President Russell Wolford.
Present.
Director Brian Glennon is not here. Director Olaf Lansford.
Here.
Director Ed McCain.
Present. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Look for a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Mr. McKay, second by Mr. Wolford. Anyone in the audience? Comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Board Secretary.
This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the board on any item not on the agenda regarding district business. State law prohibits the district from taking any action on any items not on the agenda unless authorized under section 54954.2 sub B of the government code, and your matter may be referred to the general manager. An individual may also address the board on any agenda item at the time the matter is discussed and prior to board consideration or action. Speakers will be limited to 5 minutes. Your time will start when you approach the podium, and you will be given a 30-second warning before your time expires. If you choose to ask a question during this time, any response by the board will not extend your time. Questions may be referred to the general manager to be answered at a later time after the meeting. In order to allow for a smooth and orderly meeting and allow each speaker the ability to address the board, disruptions from the audience will not be tolerated and you can be asked to leave. We appreciate your cooperation in this democratic process.
All right, thank you. At this time, we'll open up for public comments on non-agenda items. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make? All right, with no comments, we're going to move over to a presentation. We have a presentation on the effects of adjudication being brought to us by Eugene Nebeker.
Thank you very much. Good evening, President Shingle-Decker and board members and staff. I'm here this evening because several people wanted me to come and address your board. I've given a very similar presentation to the Water Master Board and also the Antelope Valley East Kern Water District. And I got a very favorable response from AVEC, and they wanted me to kind of continue doing this sort of thing. I really think that the adjudication has been very unfair to most people in the community, and I think what happened to you guys is just on the border of dishonesty. And I want to go through that and how these numbers came up with basically and what the negative effects are. And I wish you'd butt in any minute if you'd like. Every number I give you is reproducible, and it's a reference to published articles. So if you want these things, I can't spend a bunch of time going into the weeds tonight, but I can get anything I say to you in a very documented fashion. I want to frame the problem, and then the bottom line for this board is what do you want to do now? I have a particular plan I'm suggesting, and you may want to participate in that, or you may not want to, or you may say, gee, let's go this way, and I'd be very happy to help you. But I think you, as well as the whole valley as a whole, was treated very badly. My family, in case some of you don't know me, and I'm afraid Ron knows me too well, unfortunately, and we've been farming down on 60th Street West and Avenue B, right down 60th Street, a mile inside the county line into LA County for 99 years. And I was also on the adjudication technical committee, and I know the little sneaky, squirrely things that were put in there. And I was also on the scoping committee, which I'll talk about later, that has studied and had studied valley fever, which is a real scary thing. What was that? Can we switch the thing over a tad? Well, it's not important. Can you go back a little bit? But I'd like to point out, in my opinion, this is Ron Smith's fault, right here.
This is a real technical thing, that's
Oh,
why.
well, now, has he had the proper training to do this?
Well, he walks softly and has a big stick.
Okay, well, I'll have to be more respectful of you, Ron.
Lucky beats good.
Yeah, there you go. The problems with fugitive dust, and you saw some today, are particulates. That's the PM10s and the PM2.5, and they get in your lungs and cause cancer, and sometimes DNA changes and all sorts of bad stuff. They've been around for a long time. And then traffic accidents. You've seen things in the AV press of all this dust blowing across the freeway and all these accidents piled up in Lizette. And here's an example of that, and I'm sure that everybody that has lived up here has seen these sort of things. And then there was a 16-car pile up here a couple of years ago, and I'm sure all of you have seen that type of stuff too. And we've had fugitive dust scoping meetings that have been going on for about 3 years now. And the purpose of that is to define the problems associated with fugitive dust and to try to quantify them as best we can and develop a working relationship with stakeholders and affected parties in the area. And some of the attendees have been the cities, Edwards Air Quality Management District, and you see this whole list here. We've had good political support from Kevin McCarthy, Senator Scott Wilkes. In fact, our outreach committee meets with him in his office about once a month, so they've been very helpful. And Assemblyman Tom Lackey has been terrific too, Lizette. And the subcommittees are the Outreach and Awareness Committee. The problem with valley fever, which is a real sneaky thing that's come into the valley, is that the medical community, when we started, doesn't know how to treat this. They don't recognize it. And people that get valley fever thinks it's a bad cold or flu. And so if you have flu symptoms that last for a couple of weeks, you need to get in and check for valley fever. And in addition to that, we've had CMEs, which is continuing medical education for the medical doctors up here. And we've had a whole bunch of other things like Kids Act, ALA, so kids will recognize when they have a problem, and also Valley Fever Walk, you've probably seen in the press, and also High Desert Hospital Valley Fever Seminar we had this year. We're also working on vaccine development from the University of California in Riverside, and we're doing revegetation with them, and we're also sponsoring vaccine development. Now that sounds really good, but the problem with that, it may be 10 or 20 years before we get that worked out. And each one of those is very, very expensive right now. And I'm particularly focusing on the man-caused sources of fugitive dust. The big elephant in the room, of course, is the adjudication, and I'll talk about the tens of thousands of acres that the Resource Conservation District feels will be increased. And then there's also the area plan. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but because they're rezoning a lot of land in the Antelope Valley, it's going to really hurt the land values. And even the Department of Public Works is concerned because they're afraid that the land values are going to go down so low in addition to the adjudication that people are going to abandon it and they won't be around to mitigate the blowing dust, and they're going to say, if my property is not valued, why should I stay land around and do anything with it? Okay, Lizette. And as you know, you guys have been around here for quite a while, And the big problems are Antelope Valley conditions are the kiss of death for blowing dust and sand. We have frequent and high winds, soils that are highly erodible. The Resource Conservation District has had a new map out showing the highly erodible lands in Antelope Valley, and almost all the flat area of the Antelope Valley is extremely highly erodible. And then on top of that, they found out a lot of soils here are endemic for valley fever fungus. I didn't say epidemic, I said endemic. It means it's all over. And the damages are from the adjudication. There's been a whole bunch of people that have been defaulted, have no right to pump groundwater, and you can see this list here. The thing that I want to point out is that third element down. It says, and this is the Woods class action settlement, and they were awarded like a little over 3,000 acre-feet a year. And at the Water Master meeting this last week, the Water Master engineer said there was 6,000 people in that group now, and hopefully they'll be able to remove some of those. But at that rate, they're not getting the average 3 acre-feet a year. They're getting 0.63 acre-feet a year, and that's going to create a huge political problem in the valley. And then, of course, you know, because I've been moaning and complaining, the farmers were cut back less than 50% of their historical groundwater pumping. And you know, you guys were the ones that were probably hurt as bad as any of the public water suppliers in how much groundwater you have a right to use. And as I said, I just don't think that's right. Okay, well, that's that. And these numbers came from kind of historical calculations. They're not the best available science, and that's what we need now. I'll get into that in a minute. Now, the Resource Conservation District, the local one, and the one sponsored by the USDA, has estimated because of the cutbacks of all this water, there's going to be an extra 30,000 acres of blowing dust and sand. And right now, from aerial photography and field work, they feel that there's 20,000. So this is going to more than double the amount of blowing dust and sand. And I can give you those references if you want. Lizette. Now, the problem is that, and that's bad enough, and you can see what's going on, but Dr. Ben Swart, the acting director of the Acute Communicable Disease Control for LA County Department of Public Health, has estimated because of all this land, it's going to increase the amount of blowing dust and sand. It's reasonable to expect approximately 15 deaths per year just from the effects of the adjudication. And some people, and I've given you this kind of argument to understand that, some people have come up to me and say, well, Gene, suppose, why can't the community absorb this like Ford Motor Company wanted the community to absorb the burning gas tank years ago? And I said, well, look at, suppose ISIS came in and pumped off an AM/PM every year and slaughtered 15 people. How would you feel about that? And I said, oh yeah, well, I kind of get it now. Lizette. Now, if we had to do it, we'd had to live with that. But the thing that this is one interesting thing that Angie Lauer of University of California in Bakersfield said. These are the reasons why right now agricultural soils are not a culprit. They're not something that you should put your finger on, because this fungus cannot compete with the hardy microbes underneath a good farming soil. However, that doesn't mean in 5 or 10 years abandoned farm ground can't be a problem, but it's not a worry instantly. Okay, Lizette, you go on. Oh, we'll back up where you could. One more. Okay, now this is hard to accept. I mean, if we had to accept it, and the best available science backed it up, that'd be one thing. But the thing that really boils our bacon, so to speak, is the people that have been involved in this know that the total safe yield was set by the judge approximately 6 months before he heard the evidence. And that was from the court records. I have those, and I can get those for you if you want. And then he compared the ruling on overdraft of the whole basin. I know there's been some areas that have been overdrafted for years, but I'm talking about averaged over the whole basin. It was compared currently now back to 1951, and I'm not sure I understand the logic behind that. And the data shows that the basin as a whole, not certain areas, but basin of the whole, has been filling up for over 40 years. The areas that have been particularly bad are around the Palmdale Water District and LA County Water Works 40. And the problem is, I told you I was on the adjudication technical committee, and the technical analysis was horribly flawed and is criticized even in peer-reviewed, open scientific journal articles that have been refereed, and they go into it in great detail. I can also provide these to any one of you who'd like to see them, or your staff. Now, Dr. Mark Schnepp, I have trouble pronouncing his name or remember how to pronounce his name. He's associated with the UCLA Anderson School of Management. And he has indicated that these things are going to have a tremendous and long-term effect on the economics of the valley. And I know that's no surprise to you. And these people that have done these peer review articles indicate that from now, by going ahead with this adjudication, we're throwing away 1 billion gallons of water. And if you figure that they are probably going to be worth they're throwing away $1 billion, and that's assuming they're throwing away 100,000 acre feet of water a year. Now, AVEC has come up with the water master on their so-called replacement water. If you don't have water rights and you can buy replacement water, I think it's $415 per acre foot. Now, if you're a pumper and don't pump it up to sprinkler pressures, that's going to increase your costs over 9 times from now on. And so it seems like a good deal because 415 doesn't sound like too much money. But if you add that all together, divide one number by the other, it goes up 9 times. And then as you know, if you talk to any realtors in the valley, if you want to sell your property, they come up and the first thing they want to know is how many water rights you have. And if you say, well, I didn't participate in adjudication and I don't have any water rights, they say, well, your property's not worth anything, it's 0. And this is what's going on in states of Arizona and New Mexico, that people don't have water rights. I don't agree to that 100% because I think the land has some value, no matter what. And then, of course, in economics, the valley fever diagnosis is difficult, and the treatment is very expensive. And I'm going to hand something out at the end of the meeting that you guys can take home, but these ways of treating a full-blown case of valley fever are very threatening and very draconian. Okay, look. And I look at the types of analysis as a traditional, which is what I've been doing for years, but and then and what they did in the adjudication. And I say this is horribly flawed, and I'll get into that in a minute. We should be using the best available science, and it hasn't been used. This is an example, and I don't know whether you've seen my slide or not, and I don't know what this is or not, but this is a aerial view, a Landsat view of the state of New Mexico. And these green areas show areas of easy recharge. When it rains, a lot of that water goes into the ground. The red areas show areas in which there's very little, if no water that goes into the ground. This is even 2 or 3 years old. There's much more detailed information out there now. But I'm just throwing this out as an example. We need to get people with these kind of techniques in our valley. Now, Lizette, you can. I think right now our yield needs to be reevaluated because it's very fragile, it's very bad. And even the village idiot can understand it's very bad. And the up-to-date scientific method use satellite imagery and energy balance at the surface. This is the best available science. One physical example I can give you, you know, if you have a mountain and there's sun on one side and shade on the other side, it makes common sense that there's not as much recharge in the sunny area as there is the shady area. Now, this best available science can see that difference, and it can see that there's more water available than these traditional methods that use average. And then you can see that when it rains, there's water that comes down a lot for a while, and then it doesn't, and then the dust comes down again. And the traditional analysis used time or temporal averaging. These new techniques do not use that. And so those are two very easy physical examples is why these new techniques see more water. Is that? I think that we should get a science advisory board involved in our water master engineer, Phyllis Stannon, and her company that she works for, Todd Groundwater. I'm very impressed with Phyllis, and I think for the most part, she's well-intended. She's very capable of trying to do a good job. I also would like to get involved in Rick Allen. Now, these guys are super special, I believe, in groundwater hydrology to do the evapotranspiration over the entire globe, over the entire surface of the earth. And evapotranspiration is the amount of water that comes up from plants and soil all over the world. So that's a big project. And then John Hendricks is very good about what happens to the water once it gets in the ground. And Alex Reinhardt is an expert in calculating the difference in storage from one year to another. And that's one thing the water master engineer is going to look like. How much water is in the ground today and how much water is in the ground a year from now? And he's really good at doing that. And see, most of these guys have cut their teeth in Arizona, New Mexico. New Mexico particularly, because all their water comes from the groundwater. So they've developed their techniques and honed their computational skills there. And then we got Todd Umstock, and he's an expert on these computer models. He's a good groundwater hydrologist anyway, but he's an expert on these computer models. And then there's John Wilson, who is really a remarkable person. If you ever happen to see him testify or go across cross-examination, he's the best guy I've ever seen. He's very calm and very assuring and all that sort of thing. Now, he's working right now in the Central Valley, Canada, Santa Monica, and Orange County. And so he's very busy all the time. And all these guys are university professors and they're pretty much retired. Okay, and then Lizette, I think that if we want to straighten this thing out, we need to do it the easiest way, the less costly way we can, based on the current judgment. And I think we should follow paragraph 18.5.9 of the judgment that says everybody, including Rosamond Community Services District, gets a percentage of the native yield. So if the native yield goes up, which I hope it will, and sure it will with an honest and accurate calculation, we're all going to go up the same percentage. And I think to hit it home for you guys, I think your groundwater pumping rights should at least double, and maybe more if we get this going.
Is this based on?
Excuse me, go ahead.
Is this based on conversations you had with Todd Umster and the computer models, or you have?
That's published. That's published.
What's been published that makes you think the native yield will be doubled?
Well, I can send you the reference because they say that they think there's 100,000 acre feet a year that's thrown away. And then they also say that's where the $1 billion comes from. And see, we start off with a total sustainable yield. Maybe I should sit down with you sometime and write this out. That's 110,000 acre-feet a year.
Well, because what I'm hearing you say is that there's more water out there that should be allocated so that we don't have to go back so far, but at the same time, and you're talking about best available science, but we haven't used the best available science in the initial adjudication, number one, and number two, what do we have now? What do we have that we can present? Is there something we need to do to hire these people to do that, or what's involved in getting it better?
Well, I'm going to get into that in just a minute, but essentially, we're all splitting like 58,000 acre-feet. That's the native recharge that's left after Edwards takes their portion and all this other sort of stuff. Now, I might give a slight caveat here. The small pumper number will not go up, and Edwards' number will not go up, but everybody else's was. And generally speaking, we're all trying to separate and share 58,000 acre-feet. And I think that should be more like 160,000 acre-feet. So I'm just being conservative and very careful when I say go up twice. It may go up more than that. And I can send you these paper all off. I think I have your email, but I'd be happy to send that to you so you look at a little more. But see, we're about 58,000, and I think we should be up at least at 160,000. And these are not my numbers. These are numbers that have been sent to the court or have been published in a worldwide distributed literature. So I'll get that stuff to you. And please call me if you.
Well, do you have an email address and a phone number?
I think so, but in open hearing can give you email address?
Sure.
Okay. Or do you want to give me your card on the way out?
Oh, I can give you mine. Mine is all off of lawfullegal.com.
Okay. Well, I'm sure I have it anyway. Anyway, I'm sure I have your phone number. Yeah. So I'll get it. Yeah. And see, I really like this question that Olaf answered, asked, because I really like you guys to understand this. I really like you to understand it. And see what's going on here, if I may be not too brutal, we're creating a groundwater drought in our valley where one does not exist. We know we have a drought all the way through California, and that affects the imported water. But we're throwing away huge amounts of water. And if we don't get this straightened out, this water is going to disappear forever, in perpetuity. And as I say, based on the value of these water rights now, it's probably $1 billion. And I gave you an example of how our water rights are skyrocketing. Now, the big thing is that we're creating significant health and public safety problems. And I told you about the valley fever thing. And I don't know, ever since I've been dabbling in this valley fever thing, people come up to me and introduce their husbands and wives to me, or tell me about somebody. And it's really striking. And Lisette, if you wouldn't mind distributing that last thing, and I won't ask for any more slides, but I'll just talk a few more short paragraphs while she's doing it. And I'd like you to read something about the valley fever. I recommend that, and this is getting down to Orlov's question, I really recommend that if you guys would choose to, Rosamond Community Services District, or you folks personally, send a petition or a letter or something to the water master to file a motion with the court to get rid of the 17-year restriction in that citation I gave you. And see, from now on, they don't want this in the summary judgment and the physical solution. They don't want this yield looked at again for another 15 years. And just think of the consequences, health-wise, and think of the consequences economically. But I think we should get rid of that, and if you guys could do that, see, ABEC's thinking about doing that, and some other people are, and when you think about doing that, and whether you want to do that, in summary, Just keep in mind, we're throwing away 100,000 acre-feet of water a year, thereby throwing away $1 billion of value, making water costs skyrocket, reducing many property values to zero, and I think that's kind of obvious, and creating 30,000 acres of blowing dust and sand. The Resource Conservation District, the USDA part of that, and the local people have estimated it, and that's a lot. You know, we have about 20,000 now. And that'll add to traffic accidents, respiratory illnesses, and valley fever, which also will create illnesses expensive to treat and a considerable number of deaths every year. And thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And if there's any questions, I really like the question that Orloff asked, and I'll get the answers to him. And if you other folks have any questions, I would be very, very happy to respond to them.
All right, thank you, James. Any questions from the board?
Who was the one that gave us the partners for fugitive dust, valley fever, and Hannah? Was it you?
Well, that's me and all those other people.
Okay.
In other words, that's a handout of the people that have come to our scoping meetings, and the purpose of that, and have stayed involved in and out of our scoping. And the purpose of that is to understand this valley fever stuff, and also the other problems of blowing dust and sand.
June?
Yeah.
Where is the water that we're not pumping going? Is it making its way out to the ocean eventually, or where is it disappearing?
No, it's well, the experts think our basin is contained, so they just think it's accumulating. And whenever we can get the water master engineer to calculate this stuff correctly, you see, the water master engineer, even though I like her quite a bit, and I know she has a lot of difficulty, she feels that she must follow the judgment. And she feels she must follow the calculations that were into the judgment. And so we need to break her away from that and get her to use the best available science. And then you're going to see this stuff really going up. Now, as one numerical example of what you said, the first year in her annual report, she showed the basin accumulated 70,000 acre-feet in 1 year. And then the next year, it was considerably less. But things are kind of complicated because there's people doing recharge projects. And so she's got to filter that in. But she's got to get the right calculation techniques to start with. And that's what I'm in the process of getting her hooked up to these people. And see, Orloff, another question you had, I think you mentioned cost. I think costs are very important. Everybody in the basin has been bled to death with these legal costs, and we don't want to get into that again. So that's why I'm proposing for your consideration to do something that's very simple and very not costly. See, most of these experts are retired university professors or actually have university professorships now and have contracts and things like that. So I'm just tossing it out for you to think about. I'm not pounding the podium here and doing that, but I'm just thinking that you might just consider that and get back to me with what your thoughts are, because you may have some good thoughts to add to this.
Okay. Thank you, Gene.
Mr. Wilford, any questions?
No, sir.
Mr. McKay? No. Do you have any questions from the public? No other questions? Thank you, Gene.
All right, thank you for your time.
So the water shortage is all political.
All right, we're going to move on to minutes. M1, approve September 4th, 2018 regular board meeting minutes. Moved by Mr. McKay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Landsgaard. Any comments from the public? All those in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. All right, we're going to move on to consent calendar. I'm going to CC1, CC3, and CC4. Can I get a motion for them? So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. McKay, seconded by Mr. Williford. Any comments from the public? No comments. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. CC2, Mr. Lansgard, his brother and his wife own Carl's Hardware, so he will not, he will recuse himself. And one of my businesses is doing business with Carl's Hardware, and so that time it'll leave it with Mr. McKay and Mr. Williford.
Okay, so, and we can't do that.
You can't do that because you don't have a
By
quorum.
state law, you still have a quorum and two people are recusing themselves, but you need, under the state law, you need
Majority.
3 votes of
Correct.
the entire board to pass something. Normally, in a situation like that, if it was an urgent item, these are things that have already been taken care of. You could do, under the Brown Act, you can draw straws, and one of you could sit in and vote. But this is not an urgent matter, so we'll just continue this to the next meeting.
We can't do that. My contract has ended with Carl's
Okay,
Hardware.
so you can just say, just table it for next meeting.
All right. So CC2 will be tabled.
Okay.
Move on to
Oh, shoot, I'm sorry. I'll shut up.
okay. New business. MB1. Adopt resolution number 2018-17, amending administrative handbook. Mr. Smith.
Yes, a while back ago, well, at least for a number of years, and as long as I've been here, that the board has been following the government code, and so we're cleaning up our administrative handbook to say that we do conform to the government code. We changed the sections 5,000 to reflect when you have your annual elections, your annual meeting, and this actually changes the 4,000 section that actually says basically that you're going to follow the government code. And so it's pretty straightforward. If you look at Exhibit A, that's exactly what it says. It says at the annual organizational meeting that's described in the 501.0.5, the board of directors shall elect its officers in accordance to the government code 61403. The officers shall be the president and the vice president. And then the next section that says the board of directors may create additional offices and elect members to those offices, provided that no member of a board of directors shall hold more than one office. The government code, that's right out of the government code saying you can do that, but also it goes through what officers you can actually create. So you can create some more officers, but you haven't, there's not a need for more officers at this time. So you're going to be having an election come up here, and so that means the first meeting in December. The government code actually says that within 45 days after the election is finalized by the county, you need to have a meeting and have an election of officers and president and vice president. So we always have the first meeting in December. That's within the 45-day period, so we're all good with that. It's just basically a cleanup resolution.
All right, can I get a motion for MB1?
So moved.
Motion moved by Mr. McKay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Langard. Any questions from the public on this? No questions? I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Vice President Wolford?
Can I ask a question before we vote?
Yes.
I thought we did this 2 years ago.
We cleaned up one section. We cleaned up the section of when you're holding the meetings and electing officers. I think going through everything, we realized that this section needed to conform also with the government code. So our admin code has like 2 sections for elections. So like when you hold the meeting, that's a whole, it should have been probably all in one section. And then also how you go through electing the officers. And so both sections now say basically you're conforming to the government code.
So the government code is if you were the vice president, that you step up.
No, that's not the government code. You hold an election.
That's the previous.
And that,
Previous.
yeah,
Well, I
that's,
thought you guys changed it 2 years ago so that it would reflect that.
like I said, we missed this section. We got the section for the annual, so section 5,000 actually talks about holding an annual election, in December, and it has the, the time frame. It says to elect officers, but then we realized that this one also had to be changed to conform so they match. Because the one that was before does not conform to the government code.
So
And
you let it be wrong for 2 years?
What's that?
You've let it be wrong for 2 years?
No, it was Lizette's fault.
Oh, that's even worse. All right.
But even though it wasn't in writing, we've been following, even before I was on, I believe the board had been following the government code and following what it said.
Lizette, could you continue?
Vice President Wolford?
Yes.
Director Lansford?
Aye.
Director McKay?
Aye.
President Shingletaker?
Aye. All right, resolution passes, it's unanimous. We'll move on to director's reports, comments, and future agenda items. Mr. McKay.
Mr. Lansford, first up on this one first.
All right, we'll pass it to Mr. Lanskar.
All right, well, first of all, I'd like everybody, thank everybody for coming. Second, that was a very good presentation by Eugene Nebeker. Appreciate you. Appreciate you putting him on there, Eugene Nebeker. That very great presentation by Mr. Nebeker. The Fugitive Dust Committee, I just wondered if, is there any reason why we can't be participant as well?
It's not within our scope and what we do, and also if you want to discuss some of the things that Gene has said, which we've discussed ad infinitum, you know, on and on and on at the Water Master Advisory Committee is the discussion at the Water Master. But if we want to have a discussion about the legalities of that, this has always been a closed session item. We can set that and we can put Doug on the phone because there's a number of issues, you know, that Gene brought up that, but you'll have to know the legal side of it.
That would probably be a good thing, at least.
We've had the discussion before, but
Well,
we
I
can always do
understand
it
that.
again.
But as far as the dust goes, I think that is within our purview, and that we do take care of something that leaves a lot of dust. That's stormwater. Once it's moved the clay dust out onto the roads or wherever else, we have a lot of dust left over. I think it would be something to.
I would say dust control is an air quality control issue. It's also the county when it comes to construction. We follow all laws when we do construction projects, and when we have people buying dirt out from the water treatment plant, we make them come in with water trucks and water everything down. We sold, how many cubic feet of dirt that one time we sold?
300 truckloads.
300 truckloads of dirt we sold. And they had to water it down, so we followed, but it is not one of our powers, and I would say we're not allowed to spend one dime on, or one penny of the ratepayers' money or ad valorem money, because it's just, we're not in charge of dust control. That's an AQMD thing.
Well, I know we're not in charge of dust control.
That's an RMAC issue.
We are interested in, obviously, the health and safety of our constituents, including valley fever, and the fact that it takes water for fungus to grow.
Well, we're always interested, but that doesn't mean we can spend money.
We have a leaky pipe that contributes to that. That's something we wanted to address, don't you think?
Well, I doubt leaky pipes will contribute to the dust.
To the fungus. Fungus doesn't grow without the water first. It dries out and it blows away.
The valley fever stuff is actually under the soil and stuff out of the large fields. But we can have that would be my statement, is that we're not in charge of dust control, and that's not, even though as human beings we're concerned about Rosamond, that's not something that we do and we can spend money on.
But again, the bigger picture is not just dust. It has to do how does fungus grow? It grows with moisture. Where's the moisture come from? How are we contributing to it? That's something that we need to.
That's an interesting nexus, but I'm not going to buy it yet.
Well, we don't need to be contributing to the fungus. That's what I'm saying.
That's true.
Okay. And then we did attend the California Special Districts Association meeting Monday through Thursday last week. A lot of great topics. Some of them discussed with you already. The others included CSDA Finance, talking about pay-as-you-go. One of the first things they look at is what's the financial stability of the district as far as determining if they're going to loan money and what rate they're going to loan it at. They then look at about 68% of the people that they do loan money to have a AA rating. I'm not sure what our rating is now, but hopefully it's coming up with all the changes we made. We haven't got out to seek a rating for a long time, but
We'll be receiving our latest audit here in the next few weeks. No?
Has nothing to do with the rating.
Yeah,
The rating is for a bond. We don't have any bonded debt.
yeah, unless we have a bonded debt, we're not going to get a rating.
But I'm saying when it talks about our financial stability, our audit's coming out.
Yeah, and then, so that's something to think of in the future. Of course, they pointed out if you borrow money, that gives immediate help to the people who live here. If you pay for it as you go, obviously you can pay, we don't have as much money to do things with, but we have things to, whether it's constructing the water lines or sewer lines or what have you. It would depend on, if you do pay as you go, it's going to come out of our pockets or ratepayers' pockets directly, otherwise it would come out over time. we've got pretty good interest rates right now, about 1% through the finance agency, but Mr. McKay would know more about that since he skipped the seminar, whether he was a circle or a square or a triangle. Well, I think he's probably a squiggly line, but that's another story. But he missed that. So the other thing that they point out that's new is the California Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. Has to do a lot with employee privacy as far as that goes. They basically, the data is an asset in two respects. One, obviously, employee data. If they have their own phone, or if we have to provide a phone to them, that's something you have to make a decision on. But more as general manager. But if that's something you need our input on, we have policies like that. The other is that how do we protect individuals' water usage? That's their privacy. That's something other people are not allowed to get into. Whether people hack into it, it could be someone just doing a paper figuring out how to do something, how they want to approach people. But even that is something that should not be available to them. That's our data.
It's not. We keep, Lizette can tell you, she can fill you in on how we keep the customers' personal information and water usage and address and everything private.
Okay. But don't tell me, because that's we'll figure out how to reverse engineer it.
No,
Yeah.
we keep it private.
Okay.
We don't let it out.
Okay. But, and things like that. And so overall, it was a very well put together 3 days in Indian Wells, and a lot of good people down there with great ideas. And should look forward to going there next year, Ed.
And CSD always puts on a great job. They do a good job.
And again, I would like to see us look into the valley feeder aspect. We could have it on the agenda next time, whether or not we could get into helping remediate not the dust, but I think the valley fever portion of it, whether we have better policies in place. And one of the things I suppose we're going to learn with our computer system coming online is whether or not there's someone's using an unlikely amount of water in an area. You don't see water going out. Where's that water going? Is it a good place for fungus to now start growing and then dry up and affect the residents? I think that's something we could be tangentially involved. We don't have to be heavily involved, but we should be a part of it. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Landscout. Mr. Wolford.
Need to compliment Mr. Smith. My wife jumped on me when she got home last night that there was some graffiti on a wall along the freeway, and she said take a look at it and do something about it. So I drove down the freeway before 11 o'clock this morning, or maybe it was 1, I'm not sure, and it was already taken care of. And I said, honey, I got it done.
Glad I can help.
So
It's 2.5 gallons of paint.
whatever it took, buddy, whatever it took, but good job getting that on it that quick.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wolford. Mr. McKay.
I also attended the California Special Districts Association.
Turn your mic on, please, sir.
I also attended the California Special Districts Association 4 days, but the areas that I chose to go to were not as exciting as what Mr. Landsgaard is reporting. One of the first ones that I wanted to go to was the California Special Districts Finance Corporation meeting. I attended their regular meeting and their annual meeting, and I can tell you that the Finance Corporation is still a viable entity to borrow money from. They're really solvent, and they really are helping a lot of different districts. I also attended a conference lecture on the Brown Act, and one of the things that I take away from the Brown Act is, and I'll share with the board, is when we go into closed session, before we go into closed session, we're supposed to be asking for public comment, not just vote by the board itself. And that's the end of my report.
All right, thank you, Mr. McKay. All right, we'll move on. General Counsel's not here this evening, so we'll move on to General Manager update.
Yes, thank you. One of the things I'd like to tell you, we got an invitation from AVAC, and this is for an open house from 4 to 7, appetizers and refreshments on Wednesday, October 17th. up at AVEC. It's to their state-of-the-art laboratory and headquarters is opening up. We have to RSVP by October 10th, so if you want to tell Lizette, this is something, it's not going to be a paid meeting like what he goes to. This is a social event, but to celebrate their good news. And all of you can go to the event. It's not a Brown Act violation. It's a public event. And as long as you don't sit together and talk about RCSD business. So we'll send out a calendar event to everybody, and then Lizette wants to try to get RSVPs in by October 10th of who's going to go or not. Yes, you want that card? There you go. The other thing is there was an incident that happened over a week ago, and some of you get our phone messages and some of you don't, so I thought I'd give you that announcement. In the local tabloid, there was an article that basically insinuated that we have poor water quality here. And that came from a school district employee that actually made a statement at the school board meeting that there's concerns about Rosamond's water. I actually called the individual personally and had a discussion with him. He actually said he was sorry that he was passing a rumor that somebody else told him. I told him where to get the water quality reports. And so, usually I don't react to newspaper articles. You're always going to get good press, bad press, or whatever. But this concerned me greatly because it could put fear into our water customers that the water's bad, that they can't drink the water. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. So we sent out 4,900 phone messages that went, Ed got one. And so some of you don't get phone messages. And so I'm going to read you what it was. It was a quick 30-second one. And this was from me, and this went out to all the customers. It said, hello, my name is Ron Smith, and I'm the general manager for the Rosamond Community Services District. We continue to provide our community with the safest and highest quality water possible. Unfortunately, that is not the story that was published in a local tabloid this week. At a school district meeting, a school district employee stated, quote, there are safety concerns with Rosamond's water, unquote. Make no mistake about it, the district continues to exceed state standards for safe drinking water and checks water quality twice a day. Our annual consumer confidence report can be found on our website. If you have any concerns, please call me at 661-256-5807. Thank you. So after that went out, about how many phone calls was it? About 50 to 60? But one guy called me 7 times, and one time at 3:30 in the morning, but it was about his street lights aren't on, and he's in one of the districts that voted no, and he didn't leave a phone number, but he yelled at me like 3:30 in the morning. I wasn't here to get that call, but I did check my messages. But the interesting thing, we had about probably over 20 people call to pay their bills because they thought that was a phone message saying their water was going to get shut off. So that worked out good. So we sent that message out. Like I said, some of the things in the paper, even though it was accurate when it says we never publish in the paper about poor water quality, and we're supposed to check our quality and report it. And that is true. We never have published in the paper about poor water quality because we didn't have it. And so we exceed all the state standards. Remember, we had the chromium issue when the state went crazy there for a while, and they got sued, and then they went back to the old standard. And so, and that made us send out a notice every quarter to the people. But that's all taken care of. It's back up to 50 parts per billion. And like I said, Juan, our water chief operator, checks certain water qualities twice a day. He checks other water qualities once a week. He also checks different qualities once a month, quarterly, annually, and every 3 years, and the reports all go. And we have on the front page of our website, it has our consumer confidence report from 2017. So that went out, so hopefully that, answer any questions. I don't think we got hardly any phone calls on water quality, just a whole bunch of other stuff. So, the one guy calling about the streetlights, he wondered how we got his phone number. Well, he has a bill with us, and we have his address and phone number. So
He sent me an email.
Oh, you did? Okay, and everything else is good, and John's off tonight, and we got Brock here to tell you all about all the other good stuff in Public Works.
All right. Before we go to Brock, let's go to Brad. Any updates on finance?
The only update at this time is that our external financial auditors were here last week, and we're here for several days, scouring our records, looking at our processes, our procedures, our bank statements, making sure that we're on the up and up. We're expecting that report to be brought to you next month. We're skipping the first meeting, right, in November, so it'll come to the second meeting in November. But so far so good. Everything looks good. No questions, no comments, no concerns at that time. And we're wrapping up the compilation of the budget document, which will be a first time for us, at least at this level. So we're excited about that. Ron and the rest of the staff has been putting in a lot of good work on that. So we're going to be excited to bring that to you here shortly. I won't tell you when because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but it'll be soon. We're going to meet the deadline for the award, so that's going to be great as well.
It should, I'm hoping it should be the second meeting in November. So we're not going to be the first one because we're trying to actually get it done for, what national award is that we're applying?
The GFOA is the federal organization that regulates the reporting, and they do all the institutional academic side of our industry. The government finances, the Governmental Finance Officers Association. They're based in Chicago, but they and the GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, work hand in hand on issuing new pronouncements and regulations, compliance, advisory services in terms of high-level financial reporting. So they offer a budget award and a financial statement CAFR award. We don't qualify for the CAFR award because we don't issue one, so we haven't tried to go for it. But the budget award is issued to several CSDs in California, and we've been modeling our budget around they have a kind of a limited criteria of what has to go into the document in order to be eligible for the award. And this will be the first time that Rosamond has ever applied for that award.
Is it possible, does the audit have to be presented at a general meeting, or can we have a special meeting and have it presented then?
It does not have to be presented at a regular meeting. It could be, there's no need. In the last 2 years, we have not had a presentation because there hasn't been anything really to present. It's gone through on the consent calendar. It's about a 2-hour drive for the auditor to come up here and go each way. And so
we always had someone present the audit reading it.
You can, and typically they're just reading it to you, so it didn't seem to make much sense to spend somebody's time to do that, and I could present it to you if you'd like. We could have a special presentation if that would make you feel better, but it's...
Well, that's one of the things we have purview over, and that's the budget, so...
Well, not the budget.
Not the audit, you don't.
But it's related
not the audit. The budget you do.
Yeah.
The budget you do, yeah.
It's related to the audit, so if we could have something like that that's open.
And Brad works hand in hand with them. In fact, all the questions they have and all the information goes through Brad in order to get to them. And so he's very, very, has a very, very deep knowledge of the audit, and he can answer any questions on the document when it comes out.
Again, it's an audit of Brad, of us. There should be one person here presenting it, so that it's open. It's very transparent to the public. The public knows it's not an inside affirmation. But I think that's what
That's fine.
what the audit is.
Simply get a consensus of the board with that.
If it's consensus, we'll have the auditors come up and present it.
Mr. Williford?
No.
Mr. McKay, do you see a need?
Nothing. Thank you.
Or do you see a need for the auditor to come and give a presentation?
No.
If we can't trust him, we'll run him off.
All right.
Here's the thing. You're going to get the copy of the audit. You'll be able to read it, and it'll tell you everything that you need to know. And it'll be here. There'll be part of that audit will be for the public. The public will be able to have it, to read it.
That's the important part. As long as they have the chance, that they know it's on the agenda.
All right, with that,
We'll pass and we'll put it on.
Gets an award, or he gets an award, so to speak, then we can put it on a special meeting
Oh, absolutely. We're going to send out a press release and everything else.
and buy pizza.
That's right. And all of us, we have Joanne, him and Joanne has been working hard on it. I've been working on it, Lizette and Brock, and all of us have been working together, putting this document together. And so far it looks pretty good. We have a few more pieces left, and probably in the last couple of weeks, the whole public can always download it.
all right, Director of Public Works update, Mr. Smith.
It's been business as usual in the Public Works Department. Leak season is finally coming to an end for us. We only had 24 service line leaks last month and 1 main line repair, which is pretty uncommon for us when we had a AC and asbestos concrete main line break on Diamond Street. happened on a Sunday night. Luckily, the on-call employee received a call in a hurry and was able to repair it within about 2 hours' time. So didn't lose too much water there and got that pipe repaired. We delivered 291 door tags, 41 lock-offs, and then completed our monthly meter reading as usual. Other than that, we continue to move forward with testing the treatment processes at the wastewater treatment plant and just go through and make sure everything's ready to run if we decide to move forward on that project.
How much longer are you waiting on?
Right now, we're going through each component of the treatment train, testing each process before we would fire the plant up and acclimate the plant to the biological side of it. So we've had a couple snags along the way with pumps not being able to keep up with the influent, but we're working with that along with some contractor electricians. We may be able to start the plant up in the next few weeks, but that's kind of an unknown.
I guess my other question is how well is it to percolate?
We're not at that point yet. So we have to get the biologicals in, the bugs that actually help denitrify, because it's an alternating anaerobic and aerobic system that goes back and forth in the biolac system. And once we get that and it's up to the level that it needs to be, then they'll start transporting it over to the test basin that we created. But it looks like basically, if I can give you a tour of it, we took Byron there. It's like a beach. It's like you walk down there, it's all sand. It's really good. It's got to percolate really well.
And we are using the $12 million tertiary plant equipment to do that.
Correct. We're retrofitting that. So the expensive to run sand filters that are a little bit antiquated for the time. Dr. T has created these cloth filters that actually, I think Met uses them, right? Or down LA County?
Yes.
LA City, LA County uses these. He's one that's helped Palmdale Water District also do some stuff. And so we've retrofitted that. There's going to be another a clarifier that's built and everything, and it's going to use that system, but instead of producing very, very expensive tertiary water, it's going to percolate, like I said before, and we're going to get about 1,500 acre feet a year is what we expect of water that we can actually extract.
I noticed an article in the local paper indicated the editor doesn't quite understand the value of storing water versus paying more money to create purple water to place on the field, where it's much more cost effective and better for the Rosamond residents to have this system in place. Is there a way we can get a couple of short paragraphs for the next newsletter going out, or maybe some press release?
No, I was working on a newsletter for the public to see. I don't think it's going to help with that particular tabloid. I've had those discussions, and it falls on deaf ears. But this secondary effluent that's going to be disposed as percolation that we're going to water bank is actually going to be less expensive to produce. And as you know, we have to do something to stop the nitrate. So the plan in the past was going to be to reline all the ponds and produce secondary water. So we would end up with a $22 million project that we'd have to do every 15 years of relining the ponds and building new ones. So this is a win-win-win situation that it's actually going to be less money. We're going to take care of that plant and retrofit it, and then we're going to have potable water to produce for our citizens at a much lower rate.
That potable water is basically going to be the form of credit we can receive from the groundwater.
Correct.
We'll pump it 6 miles away.
Correct. Absolutely. It goes into the basin, and it'll be good water. None of the arsenic and none of the nitrates and everything. So it'll take care of the groundwater underneath the wastewater treatment plant, and then also it'll give us credits for us to be able to pump. Like I did in the budget presentation, we'll pump probably we can get credits for about 1,000 acre feet a year, but that water is going to be considered imported water because it's new water. It's water that was not put into the physical solution of native safe yield because they knew it was going to be evaporated. But if we're not going to evaporate, we're going to put it back on the ground, and the water master's already told our engineer that we will get return flow credits. So we'll get a 39% return flow on a 5-year average of what we actually percolate. So, and we calculate that to about 1,500 acre feet total a year is what we could be able to extract and produce.
That equals about 2.5 years of ramp down?
I'd have to look at the numbers and everything. So we're in the first year of ramp down. We're able to produce more water this year than we need, which is okay. We're taking some of it as carryover, some of the other rights that we have. And then next year, we're going to be cut a little bit shorter, but we're looking good that we don't really have to buy AVAC water for a number of years. And so it's going to be good. It's good all the way around.
Okay, very well, thank you.
Correct me if I heard it, but we get 39%. Whatever we put in over here, we get 39%.
Above and
credit.
beyond. We get 39% when we extract it and use it. So it's considered like an imported water. We're banking it, but when you use the imported water, the idea is that it's water coming from outside the valley. So when they calculated there's two things in the adjudication. There's the native safe yield, which is about 82,000 acre feet, and then there's the safe yield, which is about 110,000 acre feet. That safe yield from 82,000 to 110 is calculated that all this water is being brought in from outside. You use it, a lot of it goes back into the ground, and therefore it's putting water back into the ground that was not there. That doesn't come from the rain and everything. So in the adjudication, they said if you bring in 1 acre foot of water into this valley, either state water project from a well from the Fremont Basin or percolation, on what you extract of that and use every year for 5 years, they take the average of the 5 years, and the 6th year you get to extract 39% of what the average was for those 5 years, and that goes on a rolling 5-year basis. So the spreadsheet that I set up, if we buy an acre foot of AVAC water every year for 5 years, in year 6 we could produce 0.39%, 39% of an acre foot, and pump it from the groundwater because they figure that that much has gone back in.
But we get 90% of what we actually put in the first time.
We're going to get 100%. This is not one of those water bank projects. This is we're
get 100%. Okay.
We're going to get 100% of what the calculation is after evaporation on the percolation. That's why we're being so careful with our test basin, because like Brock had explained before, we dug, was it 6-foot trenches all the way around?
6-foot trenches.
6-foot trenches all the way around the basin on the berms, because the soil, this was good and bad news. The bad news was the soil was so loose and so sandy we couldn't compact it for our mounds. And that's the good news. It's so sandy, it's going to percolate like crazy, right? So we dug a 6-foot trench all the way around, lined the trench with plastic, and then filled it back in with dirt. Because the idea is that you want the exact calculation of what that's actually percolating. So the water master wants to know, is it just going to the sides, mathematically, or is it actually percolating in the ground? And then we don't have to worry about that once we build the big basin, because if it goes to the sides or goes down or wherever, it's still going into the ground. So once we get that good mathematics, and it might be a 2% evaporation, 4% evaporation, everything else will be calculated as percolation for us.
And then at the end of 5 years, as we pull it out,
Every time we use it, whether it's our water bank water, if we use stored water that we have under the ground for our water bank, which we now can extract from our wells, if we extract water, or if we use water from AVAC, or we use that water and say we have to keep this chart of, at the end of the year, calculate we pumped so many acre feet of carryover, so many acre feet of return flows, so many of federal water, so much of AVAC water, so much of water bank water, and the water master calculates all that, and then we get credit for the imported water return flows to be able to use the next year.
You're using small percentages of evaporation. Doesn't Lahontan say that it was 14% evaporation?
I don't think Lahontan says anything on that. Lahontan didn't say anything about
No, I haven't seen
Years
it.
What-
ago, I believe they told us that it was 14%.
What we have, like on the Willow Springs Water Bank that we're part of a JPA for, okay, there's the like 4% evaporation depending on when you're doing it, whether it's winter, summer, something like that. But for that CEQA, because it's in Kern County wanted a requirement that you leave behind 10%. The problem is under the water adjudication, we've had this legal argument with the water master. You can't turn around and tell us that we have to leave behind 10% because now you're taking our water. That's not an adjudication. You can sit there and say how much water actually went in and calculate what the evaporation is. That's legal. And the good thing, and it's a play on semantics, because our percolation pond is not going to be technically a water bank. the water master, it will be a water bank. To us, it will be a water bank. To Lahontan, it's disposing of secondary water by percolation. Because if we call it a water bank, then we have to blend it with AVAC water, get a Title 27, go all through these other hoops. But if it's percolation disposal, we don't. It's one of those fun California things. Disposal by percolation. And Lahontan actually we had that idea and we were going to convince Lahontan of that, but they actually came up with the idea for us before, and we said, that's great, that's a good idea, that's what we want to do. So it's going to be good. We had a good team together with Dr. T and a couple other PhDs that came down and looked at everything, so we're very, very happy.
All right, thank you. Director of Administration's Board Secretary update.
So 2 months ago, I started to provide you with customer service data, and I informed you that as the time progressed, I would add additional data that I felt would be prudent, and I have since then. And so I'll provide you with some information. Prior to either providing customers with door tags or even disconnecting their services, we do courtesy phone calls that are done 72 hours prior to give them an opportunity to make payments, to avoid disconnections, to avoid additional fees. And so for the month of September, we called 568 customers prior to hanging the door tags, 197 customers prior to disconnecting service. We had 129 customers close their accounts. We processed 4,713 bills. We had 56 new customers. Customer service processed, either over the phone or at the counter, 1,682 payments. 378 customers mailed their bills in. And customer initiated payments, meaning they went online, they made their own payment, or they called our 24-hour phone line. 1,812 customers made payments on their own, and 401 utilized bill pay services. So at the end of the month, we processed 4,867 payments. So again, as the months progress, if there's any additional data that I feel would be prudent, I will continue to add that to the list. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you very much. With that, we will go to be adjourned as of 8:12.